The Witcher Order was in full force across the continent, but small cracks had begun to form, and the first major breakaway came from a Witcher named Arnagad. One seemingly ordinary day, a Witcher named Rhys took on a monster contract as per the Witcher Code, but another Witcher had his eyes on the same contract, someone who wasn't just interested in taking the job, but in taking it from Rhys by force. That Witcher was none other than Arnagad. He was furious that someone else had claimed the contract he wanted, so he tracked Rhys down. The contract was already dangerous, perhaps too much for a single Witcher. But instead of teaming up, instead of fighting side by side, Arnagad turned his blade against Rhys. In a brutal ambush, he struck a deep gash from Rhys's shoulder to his waist. More blows were coming, but before Arnagad could finish the job, monsters appeared nearby, drawing his attention. Rhys used the moment to escape into the depths of the forest. Luck was on the wounded Witcher's side. Not long after, he stumbled upon another group of Witchers. Back then, Witchers were far more numerous, and these ones took him to the stronghold of their brotherhood, Morgreg. Rhys recovered from his wounds, but his story had already planted the seeds of distrust among the Witchers. When Arnagad returned from his hunt, the others wanted justice. They demanded he pay for his betrayal, but Arnagad wasn't about to back down. Rallying those who stood by him, he led an open revolt against his own kind. His goal? To overthrow the order from within. But against overwhelming numbers, he failed. He and his allies were immediately exiled. From that moment on, they were no longer part of any school, any castle, or any brotherhood. Days turned into weeks as these outcast Witchers traveled toward the Amel Mountains. There, hidden deep within the heart of the peaks, they found an abandoned fortress known as Arnagad, soon to be the stronghold of the Bear School. The fortress was as merciless as the mountains themselves. To survive there, one had to be tough. So tough, in fact, that over time, Bear School Witchers became legendary for their raw endurance and strength. At first, the fortress kept them safe, though they frequently faced attacks. But living in the mountains meant they rarely encountered humans. Instead, they found themselves among gnomes and dwarves, outcasts in their own right. Unlike the Witchers, these races hadn't been exiled for betrayal, but simply for being who they were. The continent's prejudice had done its work, but the age of betrayal wasn't over yet. Another Witcher was about to turn against his own. This time, it was Ivar, also known as Evil Eye. Ivar had the rare ability to receive visions from distant worlds, and his greatest vision? The Wild Hunt. Even after joining the Bear School, his mind was fixated on unraveling its mysteries. Again and again, he tried to convince Arnagad to help him hunt down the spectral riders, but Arnagad refused. Witchers had only one purpose: to slay monsters. That was the code. Frustrated, Ivar chose a different path. If Arnagad wouldn't support his cause, he would take the Bear School for himself. Gathering a group of loyal followers, he launched an attack on Arnagad. Arnagad was gravely wounded, barely clinging to life, but Ivar's forces still failed to seize the fortress. His rebellion had collapsed, and so he had only one option left: found his own school. Thus the Viper School was born. And as for the Vipers, well, betrayal ran deep in their blood, because even they would later be betrayed. Those who turned on them would go on to create the Manticore School. The Witcher world is like that: betrayal upon betrayal upon betrayal. The Bear School Witchers, meanwhile, continued their journeys through the Amel Mountains. But in time, many of them found themselves drawn to Skellige. Something about the islanders resonated with them, perhaps the way they valued strength and independence. The bears felt at home among them, taking on monster contracts and forging deep ties with the land. Still, not everyone welcomed them. Some people started calling Bear School Witchers kinslayers, a name that carried a dark weight. And just like everything else in the world, the Bear School too came to an end. Wars devastated human populations, and with fewer people, there were fewer monsters. The demand for witchers dropped. Worse still, people had grown wary of having them around. In time, plans were made to attack Arnagad, but the bears weren't fools. They saw the storm coming long before it hit. By the time the assault came, the fortress had already been abandoned. The bears had left, scattering across the land, choosing to walk their paths alone. The fortress itself stood in silence for years, slowly falling into ruin. Some say that from time to time, old Bear School Witchers would return to Arnagad, spending some time in its halls before vanishing again. But whether that was truth or just rumor, no one really knew. The Bear School's training was similar to other Witcher schools. It all started with finding a child from the continent and bringing them to the fortress. There, they underwent the infamous Trial of the Grasses. If they survived, they moved on to combat training and physical conditioning. Those who endured all the hardships were granted a final challenge, one of the hardest of of all, the Witcher candidate was left alone in the frozen Amel Mountains and had to return with a special hidden stone. It was a grueling test. Many never returned, not because of monsters, but because of the merciless cold. Some froze to death before they could even begin the search. Only those who succeeded were considered true Bear School witchers, ready to take on contracts. Arnagad's influence shaped the school's philosophy. Witchers had one duty, to their job, nothing more. That belief was drilled into them from the start. And yet, strangely enough, despite spending years training side by side, Bear School witchers never formed true bonds. Maybe it was the brutal teachings, maybe it was the cold, but once they left the fortress, they became lone wolves. It wasn't uncommon to see two Bear School witchers fighting each other over a contract. Imagine two massive armored witchers clashing in the middle of a town. It must have been quite a sight. The Bear School's gear reflected their strength. They wore heavy armor, moving like a one-man army. Unusually for witchers, they also used crossbows. And in one rare case, a Bear School witcher even experimented with using a shield. It didn't go well. He ended up losing his arm in battle, and after that, the idea was abandoned. Many Bear School witchers became famous throughout the continent. Gerd, Ivar of Belhaven, Junod of Belhaven, and Voren of Dillingen. Each had their own legend, but Voren's story was truly unique. It's said he lost an arm in battle only to have it replaced by a prosthetic limb crafted by mages and healers. His journey to get that arm, pure tragedy. But that's a story for another time. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Take care.